are celebrating Tuesdays with the Coast Guard. Surprise. It's nice to have a number of the men with us today from the Coast Guard who will be here actually participating in an active way, and just a very special occasion on what is our month that we recognize our veterans. And as we did just a week or so ago, recognizing those who have served our country, men and women alike, who have served in various capacities. And that's one of the questions I want to ask first. Obviously there's some in uniform who are going to be easy to answer this, but I'm interested to have all those who have served in our armed forces in one form or another, please raise your hand so we know. Excellent, excellent. Well, today, as I say, we have Tuesdays with the United States Coast Guard, and we're privileged to have as our speakers today Bosun, I got it right now, Bosun Mate, I know how to pronounce it, I learned that this morning. Bosun Mate First Class Patrick Talent, and Bosun Mate First Class, is it also First Class?
Yes.
That's good, First Class, Christian DePaulo. And we're glad to have them here with us. Executive Petty Officer Talent was born in Annapolis, Maryland, raised in Madisonville, Louisiana. He enlisted in the Coast Guard in September of 2007. He has previously served in the Coast Guard units in Brunswick, Georgia, Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, and Baltimore, Maryland, and he currently serves on the Coast Guard Aids to Navigation team here in Georgetown. And Bosun Mate First Class Christian DePaulo was born and raised in Tallahassee, Florida, listed in the Coast Guard in January of 2010. There will be a quiz on all this later, so you're taking notes. He has previously served in the Coast Guard units in Mayport, Florida, and Charleston, South Carolina, and he currently serves as the Operations and Training Officer of the station here in Georgetown. Please join me in welcoming both Officer Talent and Officer DePaulo.
Morning, everyone. Patrick Talent from Aids Navigation Team Georgetown, just down the street. Mr. Bob said earlier, I'm an executive petty officer down there. 11 years in the Coast Guard, been loving every minute of it. Want to do anything different. Grew up in South Louisiana, and I love the South and East Coast more than anything. Don't like the cold weather too much, but happy to go there to work. Been up there to Baltimore, about as far north as I want to go. A station in Brunswick, Georgia, which is a search and rescue station. They did law enforcement down there. Spent a little bit of time down there before I went to a specialist school, Bosun Mate A School, where I spent about 16 weeks of training out in Virginia. From there, I went to the Coast Guard Cutter Elm, which is a 225-foot buoy tender out to Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. We maintained all the offshore and ocean-going buoys. We also did law enforcement activities. As part of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill for about 6 months down there, about 2 months of cleanup and 4 months of decontamination. We also did migrant operations in the Gulf of Mexico, out in the Caribbean for a little while. We did those about every other year where we did migrant interdiction, part of our job. Along with that, we did fisheries patrols, which is accounting for the commercial fishermen off there, make sure that they're practicing all the federal laws and regulations of fishing. After that, I was transferred to Coast Guard Aids to Navigation Team Baltimore, from Baltimore, Maryland. Spent 4 years up there. Got to do a lot of different stuff besides aids to navigation. We did some ice breaking up there. Got to deal with some other units doing some fisheries stuff, and we also delivered some supplies to some of the other islands when they were locked in with ice during the winter times to make sure they had medicine, food, water, and were able to survive through the winter when they were locked in by ice. After that, I was transferred down for executive petty officer down here in Georgetown, South Carolina. Love it down here. My favorite place by far. I think that's probably why everybody lives down here right now. I'm going to miss it. I'm transferring out this summer. I got orders to Fort Pierce, Florida to take over one of the units down there. Extremely excited to go down there. It's going to be a little hotter, but we'll see how it goes. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and let Christian take over for a few minutes, and then we'll get started.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? Like you said, I'm Petty Officer, First Class, Christian DePaulo. I currently serve as the Operations and Training Officer here. A little bit about me. I started out as actually, it kind of went the other way around. I started out as a reservist. So I did 1 week in a month serving, and then I did that in Jacksonville, Florida, Mayport. And then from there, I got involuntarily activated. I got that phone call that said, hey, you got 2 weeks, you've been activated. So dropped everything, became activated, fell in love with what I did. So they asked me if I wanted to integrate and come in active duty. I said absolutely. So I was there, ran a search and rescue out of there, providing, was a training person down there, doing search and rescue, law enforcement for the area, great experience. And then from there, when I integrated into active duty, they sent me to Charleston, South Carolina. Funny story actually, when you integrate, people that don't know, they don't give you a choice on where you get to go. Usually you get to put in like a list of places you get to go. So that didn't happen for me when you integrate. And I called, they told me you get to come into the Coast Guard. I'm really excited. And this time I was engaged. So my wife, at the time, I called them, I was like, hey, where are you guys sending me? And they said, well, we have you going to Puerto Rico for 2 years to serve on this boat. And I said, okay. All right, never been to Puerto Rico, but sure, why not? Tell the missus at the time, I said, hey, guess what? Going there, 2 years. And she said, okay, great. We'll make do, we'll be all right. So then all of a sudden my orders come in and said, you're moving to Charleston, South Carolina. So the wife, called the wife and I said, yeah, good news, bad news. Great news is you get to move to Charleston, South Carolina. Bad news, we're going to the biggest boat the Coast Guard has that deploys for 3 to 6 months at a time. So you got to go with the good and the bad. But we actually loved it there. The boat, I was on the Coast Guard cutter James. I commissioned her. I'm a plank owner. Absolutely blast there. We deployed all over the Eastern Pacific and Caribbean, then all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, Colombia, Panama, Mexico. We did all counter-drug narcotics. While I was there, I was also in charge of, I worked in the navigation division for prior coasties, QMs. I was a QM as a bosun mate, but then I moved down and I stood up their pursuit program. For those, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but pursuit is the boat chasing aspect. That's where if you see videos or something online of chasing boats, shooting out engine blocks, that's what I did. And that's what I stood up on the James. While I was there, we did 25 interdictions and interdicted almost $2 billion worth of cocaine street value. And that was just one boat, and that is going on every day down there. Every day of every minute there are cutters down there doing that mission. It's the new primary mission. We'll get into it a little bit more later. From there, 3.5 years there, I decided to, came up, made a first class, and I actually had a newborn, so I wanted to stay close. So they sent me up here to operations officer at Station Georgetown. Absolutely love it. I wish Senior Chief was going to be here. I've worked for him for 9 years. I really enjoy the crew here. The area is great. It's been great to my family and me, and that's what I do here. So I manage like the Hurricane Florence. We'll get into that a little bit, maybe a little bit later, but I coordinate all the operations and the flooding response for Horry and Georgetown County. Luckily, Georgetown, we did okay down here, but Horry County got it pretty bad, and I helped coordinate search and rescue efforts and flooding response for the whole area. Just a little background about me. I think now we're going to get into just a little bit of different things about the Coast Guard. I'll let Patrick take back over.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to try to slow down. I tend to talk very fast. If I stumble over some words, please feel free to stop me. If you guys have any questions at any time, just raise your hand. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but after hearing, I forget your name already, this second to Christian talk, I think a great slogan for recruitment would be chase ships, shoot engine blocks. I think you have no problem.
We have this broken up into 3 different sections. First one's going to be a Coast Guard overview of the 11 different Coast Guard missions. Second section is kind of how history brought us some of our missions. And the third section is going to be the Coast Guard outlook, or the strategic plan going to Coast Guard in the future. So U.S. Coast Guard, America's Maritime Guardian. All right. U.S. Coast Guard is one of the 5 branches of the Armed Forces. Multi-mission, 11 different missions we have. We're maritime. We are the oldest continuous seagoing service. So 11 responsibilities or missions of the Coast Guard. First mission is going to be ports, waterway, coastal security. It's the Coast Guard's primary mission, and it includes the protection of the U.S. maritime domain as well as the U.S. marine transportation system. It's also the primary mission of the Coast Guard, along with search and rescue. Everybody thinks of the Coast Guard as search and rescue. A little bit of law enforcement. Law enforcement is huge in the Coast Guard. Protection under the PWCS includes prevention and disruption of terrorist attacks, sabotage, espionage, and subversive acts. Christian, if you want to go into a little bit of what you did down south on the big
So,
boats.
I dealt with a lot of this in Mayport, Florida. We did escorts of like ships and key containers for the United States and key components like dangerous materials, prevent them getting attacked. We escorted them in and out, as well as supporting the war effort overseas, like supplies going in and out. We protected those assets here on the home front. And then the other part about this is kind of piggybacking on what Patrick said. The Coast Guard is the only military branch that has law enforcement authority on U.S. soil. So, like no other branches can do that, that kind of a mission, which makes us very unique. And that is why many people, we don't work for the Department of Defense. We actually are the only military branch that works for Homeland Security, and that gives us our law enforcement presence here.
A lot of times, Coast Guard will put members from different boarding teams on Navy boats. Now give us a broader aspect of what we can do in the territorial seas, if I'm correct with that, to get more law enforcement out there to do protection, homeland security, fishing, and inspection of different container vessels so we can get out there and be more productive. Our second mission is drug interdiction. Coast Guard is responsible for preventing the flow of illegal drugs into the country through maritime channels, as well as works partnership with other federal agencies to prevent drug smuggling through the air. They are charged with guarding a 6 million square mile area that includes the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Eastern Pacific.
So this is all I did on my old boat, and I love this mission. It's my bread and butter. That's why I kind of have a grin on it when I talk about it. This is a lot what the Coast Guard's gearing towards now. The migrants are kind of going away, which we'll get into a little bit, but this is the new mission. These pictures, if you want to see, so this is my old boat. This is the type of boat I was on. I know it's a little hazy, but that's the new cutter that we have. The Coast Guard's constantly updating its fleet, finally. We're getting new assets. We're actually being able to compete with these agencies or these cartels. So what the Coast Guard does right now is most of the drug trade, the way it works is it's being made down in Ecuador, Colombia, and it's being shipped by boat around Panama and Costa Rica into Mexico. And they're letting the Mexican cartels, if you guys know, heard on the news all the violence that's happening down in Mexico, those cartels are responsible for them getting it into the United States. So what our job is out there is to try to get them between the manufacturer and the distributor. And so that's what we're doing out there, and that's what you see. So this is a couple examples of what you're looking at here. This is a semi-submersible. This is one of the tactics they use to prevent detection. What they do is they take a sailboat, they chop off the top, fiberglass over it, put a little motor on it, and they paint it blue, which is so hard to detect. Right now, there is rumors that there are fully submersibles submarines, but we haven't encountered any of them as of yet. What you see over here is when we deploy, we take a Coast Guard helo that's outfitted with a machine gun and 50 cal sniper rifle. So this is what they're doing. They're conducting warning shots. So our primary mission we got is to stop these vessels. We're not going out there to harm anyone. Our job is to get them to stop. These members are then taken into U.S. custody, jurisdiction, and then they are prosecuted through U.S. court system. Treated no differently than anyone else that goes to the court system. We put together an entire, like you're giving it to a lawyer, they take over the case, and it is no different. And you can kind of see that's the helo gunner with his 50 cal trained on it. So that's just a little bit about the drug part that we do.
Anybody have any questions about this mission? Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in the previous slide you had a specialty dog. I'm guessing it was for drugs. Do you also use the dogs that can detect bombs or cyber materials, like drugs, electronics?
Yes, ma'am. We actually do. So there's specialized units in the Coast Guard. I think there are 11 dog handlers right now, strategically placed throughout the United States, and they're attached to units. So they are completely used for the Secret Service uses the Coast Guard dogs all the time. They do bomb detection, all sorts of, they're trained no different than the highest trained dogs for everywhere. They just do, they're not necessarily used as like police dogs, like so say like to go stop an individual. I think they're only detection as far as I know.
On your part about the electronic side, I'll write it down and try to find this for you.
FBI has some.
Do they? That's awesome. Be interested to learn about too. All right, my slide now. Ace navigation. Coast Guard is responsible for the correct navigation and proximity of vessels on the water. It has the ability to order vessels to slow down, change direction, alter their practices if they might lead to disturbances on the water. Aids to navigation system is huge out there right now. I love every part of it. It's not the most known or glorious Coast Guard mission. We go out there, we scrape buoys, we paint them, put new chain on them, put a new light on it, put it back over. So we're not doing search and rescue, we're not doing law enforcement, but we are pretty much, in my eyes, the bread and butter of the maritime system. It marks all the channels coming into the waters, along with all the hazardous navigation offshore and even inland. We also help NOAA out. We have NOAA buoys that we work with NOAA with our assets to get all our weather features out there, incoming waves, offshore disturbances. See what else is there to say about it. If there's any discrepancies with aids and navigation, we got to go out there. We have a different timeline. We have to go out there and fix them. If a hurricane comes in and pushes all the aids out of the way, or some of the major categories, we will actually shut down the port until we're able to get it to a certain percentage to be able to open it back up. The reason why it's so big too is most of these larger ports, Charleston, Savannah, Chesapeake, Baltimore, if these commerce can't get in, it's costing these boats lots and lots of money. It's costing lots of money in taxes and lost revenue. Other countries can't bring all the commerce in to bring to us, to be able to sell to us. So we want to maintain them the best we can to be able to keep them open. I love it. Lighthouses are part of it. Yes, sir.
Patrick, how far do you cover out of the Georgetown?
Out of Georgetown, we go to the sea buoy, which is about, the Winyah Sea buoy, which is about 4 miles offshore. We do have some up and down the coast, which is like number 2 East Bank, which is just south of us. That one's about 10 miles offshore. We have different class vessels, 225-foot vessels. We have one out of Charleston, which does the offshore buoys, which are like these. This is actually a 26-foot high buoy, and it's 8 feet in diameter. It weighs about 12,000 pounds, so they have a big crane on it, which they can pick up. The other class vessels we have are construction tenders and river tenders, which is the one on the left slide. Smaller crane on it, but they will drill our piles for us, and they can pick up smaller buoys to work with us. At my unit right now, we have just a 26-foot TAMD, which stands for a trailable aids and navigation boat. We have a 500-pound davit on it, which can pick up small sinkers and small buoys. And we mainly do the intercoastal waterway and the tributaries that go out to it. So, yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you're getting into virtual aids to navigation.
They do. We have them in a lot of the major ports, and they're on AIS, Automatic Identification System, which is they come up on radar and they come up on some chart plotters that have the features on them. But they are doing it because the cost effectiveness is there for it. And also the amount of time that it will go off station, which it really can't, because unless GPS or DGPS goes down, it's not going to go off station on your chart. So they are doing it. It's out there. It's been out there for quite a few years now. It's great. I love it.
Is that the 938?
This is a 826 right here. 935. Yes, sir.
There's a white buoy out there prior to the lighthouse. That is that a CG on it?
It is. It's a CG mooring buoy. We have 87-foot patrol boats that come out of Tybee Island and Charleston that will actually moor up their boat overnight there, so specifically for them. So,
That's shallow in there.
it gets shallow. I think it's about 10 feet of water. So, yes, sir.
What are the most up-to-date ways that you place a buoy nowadays?
We use DGPS, Dynamic Global Positioning System. It can place it within about 3 yards with the error that it has in it. So within about 9 feet, we try to get it within about 3 feet. And that's where the sinker goes down and touches bottom. Then it also has a swing circle around it, depending on how much chain and water depth to where it's accurate within about 15 yards. So the more skinnier areas, such as the intercoastal waterway, we're going to mark, if possible, with pilings, because especially in the rock cut up north, we want to make sure those are marked pretty good, so you go away from those rocks, and the swing circle and buoys won't let us be able to put buoys there, so just get cut up by the rocks. So
That's a huge step forward for setting aids to navigation.
with the sextant.
With horizontal sextant.
Yep. So there's a lot of error in it. Yes, sir.
Does the lighthouse fall under this category?
It does. Lighthouse does fall under. We're out there about every 6 months. We're out there about every 2 to 3 months going out there just to do some work on it, brush cutting and whatnot. But the light we maintain every 6 months. We go up there, change the lamps out, test the batteries. Batteries get replaced every 6 years. Make sure our solar panels are good. The lighthouse is actually owned by DNR right now, but we maintain the actual light in it. So the property is owned by DNR.
And how far out does that go? How far out can that be seen?
The lighthouse, I gotta look it up, I think it's
15 miles.
Is it 15? 15 miles on the lighthouse.
On a clear day.
On a clear day. 15 miles on a clear day. So, any other questions?
Do you maintain the targets and shipping lanes?
Such as the ranges?
Yes.
Yes, sir, we do. All the towers out there we climb, these are my climbers here. So, yep. They like heights, I don't. All right, search and rescue. The Coast Guard's predominantly primary mission. The Coast Guard is considered a worldwide leader in the field of search and rescue. It has facilities on the east, west, and Gulf Coast, along with stations in Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Great Lakes, and other bodies of waters in the U.S. The Coast Guard is the first line of defense when maritime search and rescue effects are needed. From the station.
Yeah, so this is what we do at the station. We're your primary response for, our assets, we have two 29-foot boats, and then we have one 45-foot, pretty much can go offshore. And we have about 26 people at our station there, and then combined with the AMP, we have about 32. And we're here 24/7, it's manned, no different than a fire station. We go out in whatever kind of weather we can get there. We have a helo also on standby out of Charleston from Savannah. There's a crew there 24/7 on alert status, ready to go whenever we need it, if we can't get there fast enough by boat. And so that's pretty much everything for search and rescue. I mean, we're capable of responding to whatever, could be anything at the unit.
So I know I have the funny bumper stickers to support search and rescue get lost. I put it up there just to get y'all's attention.
Is there a sign-up sheet for that?
I can make one. Search and rescue, the best thing for search and rescue, I want to say the best thing to keep the mariner and the general boating public safe is education. We have the Coast Guard Auxiliary, which does a lot of public boating education, but it comes down to the boater itself too. You need to know what gear you have on board, life jackets, a personal location beacon, follow a float plan, let somebody know where you're going. If you don't feel comfortable, don't go. There's always another day, it's going to be sunnier tomorrow. But educate yourself, try to push that off to other people, especially the younger generation that's bulletproof, that can't get hurt. Make sure they're educated. Life jackets, life jackets, life jackets.
And actually, going back real quick, I didn't realize it. This is Mayport. That's my old station. I remember that case. That was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is it a national initiative to require boating safety education for young people coming up?
It's not national as part as federal, I think, speaking. There are certain states, now I'm not sure what states they are, but in Maryland, you have to take a boater safety course and get a boating license before you can take it out. Funny part about that is, even though I'm a boat captain to say, I've been driving boats for the Coast Guard for a while, I can take all my boats out up in Maryland, nobody blinks an eye or flinches. If I take my personal boat out in Maryland, I still have to have that boater safety course. And so I believe it's an online course, and it's just just learning and education, and then you fill out a form. I don't know if there's a fee for it, and then they send you a little license in the mail. So, but they should have it in every state, just like you gotta go drive the car, you know? So it's just education. Any other questions on this? All right. Living marine resources. Coast Guard is also charged with maintaining safeguards that protect marine resources and all acts that violate U.S. federal, state fisheries laws. Marine resources, fisheries, commercial fishing fleet, and even your recreational fishing fleet. We're going to go out there, board the vessels, make sure they're in compliance with all federal laws and regulations, make sure they're fishing in the correct season, and also we're going to be inspecting their nets and fishing gear, make sure they have the appropriate, lack of better term, safety fishing gear for turtle exclusion devices, things that can harm bycatch that you're not supposed to be catching. Some fishermen believe that they can manipulate their nets to catch more fish, but the turtles that get in there can't get out. So we want to make sure we protect the marine resources. We go on these boats, you can see this looks like a shrimping boat over here, possibly a scallop boat, but I think it's shrimping. We'll inspect them, make sure they have all appropriate safety gear, along with all the appropriate fishing gear is in compliance. We do go on, it's kind of a fuzzy picture, we do go on and we count their catch. We get them in fish holds, packed with ice. We got to go through the ice and make sure that they don't have too much flounder, too much redfish, or bycatch, or the wrong species on board, just to protect the environment. If we don't, we'll lose it. It's big. Yes, sir.
Is that a cooperative effort with other agencies?
This
like
does, this looks
DNR
like.
Or Fish and Wildlife? Or-
Yes, sir, it is. We work here in Georgetown, we work with DNR, we work with SLED, we work with everyone for this effort, all up and down. From, at least our territory goes from the North Carolina border down to McClellanville. Yes.
There's a, yes, ma'am.
Did you say that you actually go on just like Al's boat, a regular fishing boat? Now let me ask you this. What about the boat that goes out and they don't know that they can't catch a certain species at that particular time in the year? How do you treat people like that?
He's the morning Australia.
Okay. No, I mean, that happens.
It does, and we try to, at least within the Coast Guard, at least for me personally, and this is the way that I train all my people, is that we try to be as understanding as possible. Obviously, and that's a case-by-case basis. So if we go out and you go, okay, well, you've been a fisherman in the same town for 7 years,
Yeah.
you should know better, right? But then if you're like, say you're from North Carolina and you're out here on vacation and you go out and actually get the wrong fish, we try to be as understanding as possible, and that's a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Christian, I have my boat inspected every year by you guys.
Okay.
The auxiliary come by, put a little sticker on all that. How come DNR refuses to recognize your safety inspection?
So unfortunately, this is that same old, this happens all the time. So we enforce federal law, right? And then DNR enforces their state law. So that's their choice if they don't want to recognize it, and also depends on the officer, but because our laws may be a little different than what state law requires you. They may be so state law may be a little bit more strict than federal law, which is what I've noticed in certain places, especially in Florida where I came from before. State law was a lot more strict. FWC down there, the Florida Fish and Wildlife, is very strict on certain things. And that could be a reason why DNR sometimes doesn't want to acknowledge it.
Possible another reason is that DNR is so scarce. I mean, Coast Guard's scarce too, but what they're trying to do is implement, letting the average good guy know that they're out there, because it takes one time for somebody not to put a life jacket on a little kid.
Yep.
And that just kills me. People think, oh, DNR's not around. Oh, the Coast Guard is.
And I still see it passing boats. I'll see a 4, 5, 6-year-old girl on a pontoon boat with mom and dad, and they just don't know. So, hey,
Riding on the front.
no reason to just educate them.
I've dealt with a lot of that. Not here.
I like y'all's questions, though. These are good questions, and a little bit of controversy in it, which I like.
Good discussion.
Marine safety. Coast Guardsmen are responsible for providing an avenue for safe, secure, and environmentally sound maritime commerce. Marine safety, we have marine safety inspectors that go out and actually part of marine safety units, which is here in Myrtle Beach. And they're going to go out and they're going to inspect mostly commercial boats, make sure they have all the appropriate safety gear. They're going to put the little sticker on the window. They're going to run them through drills. As you can see on the left side, they're running through probably a banded ship drill to make sure they can put their Gumby or survival suits on within a certain amount of time. On the right side is going to be a larger container ship, larger boat that has the life rafts on the right side, and they're going to be putting a life raft over the side to do a life raft drill to make sure they can safely get off the boat. Another aspect of this that we don't think about is, I don't know how many people, most of us have been on a cruise once in our life or not, and at the very beginning of the cruise, everybody's got to get their life jacket, go to their abandoned ship station. Before all that even happens, the Coast Guard goes to these cruise boats and runs the crew through drills to educate them and make sure that they're following the safe practices so we can be safe out there. But so they're a big aspect on that for the marine safety units. A busy job. Not a lot of people see what they do, but they go out there and just keep the crew safe to keep us safe.
It's interesting that even though big cruise ships that come in the United States are foreign flag, the Coast Guard has agreements with those ships, and they do come aboard, just like you said, even though it's a foreign flag vessel.
Correct. Every vessel that comes in that's foreign flag, I believe, has to be, if they're coming from another country, a Coast Guard boarding team has to go to inspect that boat. And they're inspecting to make sure they're safe. All their logs are in order. Stowaways, which is pretty much people in foreign countries getting on that boat that the cruise ship crew doesn't know, hiding to get into the U.S. Multiple other things are expected too. So, do you want to piggyback on this at all? Or?
Not too much for the marine safety aspect, but kind of commenting on our jurisdiction. The U.S. can board any U.S. flag vessel or any vessel in U.S. territory. That is one thing that the Coast Guard does. So, like, if you get stopped by the police officer, they have to have probable cause to stop you, right? You gotta be speeding, you gotta have the tail light out. They have to have a reason to stop you. The Coast Guard is that one agency that has the authority on the water to go ahead and just stop anyone to do just a safety boarding, just to make sure all the safety equipment on board is good to go. As long as you're underway, they have the ability to do that, which is, I think it's pretty impressive that we actually have that authority. We don't get on board to try to look and try to dig through stuff. We get on board, we check our checklist, we make sure everyone's being safe, give them your good form, and we're good to go.
Question. Do you have any jurisdiction over the boats who just stay on the water and people live in them?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
and
ma'am.
do you take that seriously to check the environmentally sound practices of body waste and so forth?
Yes, ma'am. They are required to have certain pumping standards. They're required to have certain placards in place. And that will be a combination of working with the station and the marine safety up in Myrtle Beach, especially for this area. Because I know there's a lot of people that live on their boats, especially.
Or they're docked and live on them.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, we can. That's working with the marine safety, and then we have that ability to check those boats. Yes.
I used to be with the Wynyard Rescue Squad here, and we'd get called out all hours of the day and night, probably 3 to 4 calls a week. Since they did away with the rescue squad, does that put a bigger burden on you guys?
I just got here this past summer, so I'm not quite sure. Our op tempo is decent for the summer. But we work closely with like CETO and Towboat US here locally to go ahead and help everyone that we can.
And I believe Midway's got their
Midway has stood up there.
Surf squad stood up too. See them all the time. Just to piggyback real quick off your question, ma'am. Two of the key things they do check for discharge are oily waste, and your sewage discharge valve has to be in the correct position. That's one of the first things that you guys always check. And the reason why they check that first is because they have to run through the bilge area of the boat to make sure it's sturdy enough to be safe to board on. So it's just a quick check on it, and it's pretty pertinent that it's closed. So.
What about derelict boats up here?
Derelict boats?
Yeah.
We report them, and then
they all get inspected right away by the gentleman that's Chief Warrant Officer Connors up in MSU Myrtle Beach. He goes out to each one, gets a name, owner information off them, make sure it's not leaking or discharging any oil. If it is, we do have the marine safety unit or the technicians from down south to come and secure the oil or whatever's leaking from it, take samples from it to try to reduce as much pollution as possible. But every boat that's derelict after a hurricane isn't going to get inspected. Last hurricane, I had to take them out for all up and down the intercoastal waterway. And then as far as derelict, how long you can stay out there, it's going to be up to DNR. They're going to work with DNR to remove those vessels.
And do they contract with CETO to pull them someplace?
They're going to work with the owner and work with DNR.
I see.
Don't have a good answer for you on that. So, any other questions on this aspect?
yes, sir.
Yeah, beyond the, like a houseboat or derelict boat, could you just speak a little bit more about what you guys do in terms of marine environmental protections from a more commercial standpoint, in terms of commercial fishing boats, or especially, I know there's with cruise ships.
Yes.
That's a big component, but could you just talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes, sir. So, like, for this area, or kind of just overall Coast Guard?
Overall Coast Guard.
Okay, so we have MST, so different rates off of bosun mate. We have marine safety technicians, which this is their only job. So I comment a lot on the oil spill that happened out of off of Louisiana. We do everything in our power to limit the pollution that happens, and then we have special people that are designed and trained to clean up the pollution and to work with other agencies to do that. And as far as the commercial side, you know, like Patrick said, the our inspectors, well, they have to do yearly inspections on the commercial fishing fleet to ensure that these policies are in place. We just actually had a case like 2 weeks ago where we terminated a guy and said, you aren't getting back underway because you're leaking oil in your bilge and you're polluting. And they said, you're not leaving until you get that fixed. So that's the kind of thing that we work with the office up in Myrtle Beach to take care of. And those offices are strategically placed all over the coast to do this. There's a big office in Charleston, there's the little detachments up here in Myrtle Beach, and they inspect any boat that enters U.S. territorial seas, which is going to be up to 12 miles offshore. We can check that boat, whether it's foreign, regardless, to make sure that they're not polluting our environment and our resources.
Another aspect of that is we do a lot of facilities inspections, which are actually onshore of these pumping stations for liquid petroleum, any oil stuff that gets pumped from a shore station to a vessel. We're making sure that those pumping stations are working correctly, not going to be able to leak. Those tanks are all in good working condition. They're not going to rust out within a few months or whatnot. So the safety units are going to these facilities onshore and next to the water to make sure that they are following the best OSHA practices. So, all right, our seventh mission is defense readiness. Under this mission, the Coast Guard stands prepared to support the national military strategy and Department of Defense as one of the 5 branches of the military. So even though we're Department of Homeland Security, we are going to work with Department of Defense. This is all our overseas stuff. So a little perspective on this. In an average day, the Coast Guard has 6 patrol boats, 400 personnel, protecting Iraq's maritime oil infrastructure, training the Iraq naval forces, and keeping the sea lanes secure in the Arabian Gulf. So we're overseas right now, plenty of us over there, still protecting that infrastructure to make sure it's safeguarded and training those people up. Working with the Navy, Marines, Army, Air Force over there. Every day, we just had, one of your guys just got orders over there, so we'll be going over there this summer to do patrols.
And under time of war, we automatically, so if Congress says, declares war gets declared upon us, and we go to a state of war in the United States, we automatically go under DOD and in the Navy to be able to respond to whatever could happen.
Any questions on this mission? All right, migrant interdiction. Migrant interdiction. The Coast Guard works with federal agencies to prevent the flow of illegal immigration into the country. When immigrations are found at sea, they can be returned to their countries without the expense costs to the U.S. Average day, the Coast Guard would interdict 10 undocumented migrants at sea that are trying to enter the U.S. Migrant interdiction is huge in the Caribbean. It happens every day. We have patrol boats out there constantly rescuing these migrants to make sure they're safe and bringing them back to their country. They're in mostly makeshift boats. I mean, this is a wooden sailboat that's probably from the 1950s with, I'd say, about 30 people on it. It's dangerous what they're doing. It's scary. Good people just trying to make a better life for themselves, but we got to make sure they're safe. Do you want to piggyback off this?
It's kind of died down a little bit recently with Cuba kind of opening up a little bit. The Cuban immigration, mass migration has kind of died down. Right now it's mostly people trying to come from Haiti and a couple people coming across from Mexico by boat. But that for as far as the Coast Guard mission goes. Sir?
My vessel, the Mohawk at Key West, we had the record for 642 Haitians on the flight deck. And about 12, 15 Marines. And some of the wildest things you've ever seen in your life. You see that boat right there with a freeboard. See the green, the white, and the red. 90% of them you found in the old days, and I hope to never see it again. That would have 180 to 200 people on it. You see almost no freeboard.
Haitians too. I mean, we know Haitians
I mean,
and Cubans how they are.
3 layers of people thick just getting off the island.
Yep, and I don't want to scare anybody or anything, and I'm sure you can attest to this, that you'll never know what people do until they're desperate. And I have seen some of the most things you don't think human people can do to try to get to the United States. And I'm not going to say any really examples, but it's something like normal people like that live here and like that have day-to-day lives that they don't ever think that this is possible. So, I mean, it's just, it's a very dangerous mission because they'll do anything to get here and try to make a better life for themselves. And they're not criminals. They're just trying to do the best thing they can for themselves. And I don't know what I would do in that situation, but yeah, it's dying down a little bit from now we're shifting to the drug thing, but it's still there.
Do they still have the 1 foot dry policy in effect?
No, that actually is gone now. The 1 foot, the wet foot, dry foot policy from Cuba is gone. And they expected a mass migration during that, but it's actually died down because Cuba has opened up their borders and kind of the boycott's been lifted and there's better relations with Cuba right now. That it's, and the economy's getting a little better there. So yeah, wet foot, dry foot, I think it was Obama that, I think it was President
I don't want
Obama.
to give any false information, I'm not sure. So.
I think, but I know it's gone.
All right, our 9th mission, Marine Environmental Protection. This also falls under the Marine Safety Units. Marine Environmental Protection, the U.S. Coast Guard seeks to prevent oil and chemical spills into the ocean and illegal dumping into the U.S. waters. This picture is kind of a classic example. They got me off guard. Looks like dirt. That's oil. This is a MSU unit, probably MST, taking an oil sample to bring back to see what it's all about, where it came from. Average day, the Coast Guard response to 10 pollution incidents can range anything from a vessel leaking oil or sewage to crude oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico to just a bad pump, one of the oil lift stations along the Gulf Coast. They inspect 70 containers, inspect 33 vessels for compliance with emission standards. It's a huge aspect to piggyback it off keeping environmentally friendly waters and safe waters. Along with keeping our living marine resources safe. Yes, sir.
On a percentage basis, I'm just curious, on your inspections, how many are you finding with violations?
I don't have numbers for you.
Just a ballpark, is it 20%, 80%?
With violations, towards, and it's going to be different from commercial to recreational.
Yes.
You know, you can get a 1950s sailboat, you can find a violation if you want it. Like this pipe's going to rust out soon. But I just don't know offhand. It's not my aspect of work.
Sure.
So I can get back to you on answers on it, but I don't want to give you any false information.
Thank you.
So not a problem. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
If you have a spill, if you're on, let's say, commercial vessel operations, or let's just call it commercial, and you have an oil spill, and you know you have an oil spill, you're required by law to pick up the phone immediately and report that. And the Coast Guard has a central office in D.C. that collects that information. And they're gonna check what you tell them, you know, as to the magnitude. They're gonna come out and actually check it. And you know, it's very important for you to call in, because it goes from a misdemeanor possibly to a felony if you don't call in. And then they're going to come out and they're going to, you know, look at what you had in place to prevent it in the first place. You know, if you have hydraulics on a dock of your ferry service and a line breaks, you know, have you got secondary protection to minimize the possibility of that happening? So the Coast Guard really keeps a close watch on that.
That comes down to facility inspections too, for fueling areas or whatnot, to have that secondary boom. If you have a fuel line break or a boat that discharges fuel, how are you going to contain that quickly? And that's where our marine inspectors come in. So, any other questions? Ice operations. Ice operations are getting big for the Coast Guard right now. In 2009, the Coast Guard performed domestic ice breaking to keep waterways open for commercial traffic, assisted 479 ice transits, enabled the transit of $2 billion worth of cargo, and brought scientists to the Arctic to map the floor of the Arctic Ocean and study on polar bears, ocean sediment, and methane gases. Ice operations, part of the National Ice Center, working with the Coast Guard and Navy is working with them along with NOAA, and it's to protect the vessels of the Great Lakes and the northern waters. Ice operations are getting big up in the Alaskan area. As the water's warming up, different ice areas, ice packs are opening up, and they're bringing more vessels up there. Where the Coast Guard wasn't originally stationed, 10 people stationed up there because it was all iced over and we didn't have vessels up there. we're starting to get big on having more people up there, along with our newer icebreaking fleet getting into effect and getting built.
They're building 2 more.
It's a process, but it's going. Yes, sir.
Did he just say that we're building 2 more polar birds?
We are.
Do you still have the Polar Star and the Polar Sea?
We do.
They're still running?
One is. One is.
Those are
I think
Just
they
left-
Those are the new ones.
I think it just left
Those
last
green
week.
teams
We'll be
are
back
ready
next
to
week.
They've cannibalized one, I think, to get the other one running.
I don't know if it's Star or Sea, which one's running.
I don't know, I don't
Confused.
remember.
All right, law enforcement, 11th mission of the Coast Guard. Coast Guard is responsible for protecting the country's borders from illegal and unregulated fishing activity. Christian, all yours.
So we kind of spoke a lot of this. We do so many different law enforcement missions. There's specialized units now. We have a counter-piracy that trains almost identical to the SEALs. That just opened up a whole new unit out of San Diego that literally trains with the SEALs to do, I'm sure most of you have seen the movie Captain Phillips. The Coast Guard is trained to do that exact mission. It's called MSRT, Maritime Response Security Team. So they do all sorts of craziness. I think this is pretty them. They get all the cool equipment and gear. Budget's fantastic. I'm not jealous at all. And then, so then we have those, and then we have what's called a maritime MSST, which is a maritime safety security team, and they do more like defense stuff. They deploy and do like presidential details, and they do like deploy all over the place. And then you have us. We do local law enforcement, and then you have the counter drug, and then you have. We just are such a wide variety of law enforcement at the Coast Guard. A lot of people don't know about the Coast Guard is that it's almost overwhelming in taking over the search and rescue aspect, and this is the new focus of the Coast Guard to protect our borders and our citizens. Any questions about law enforcement in general? I know we've covered kind of a lot of that already. Yes, ma'am.
We have a nephew who's Fish and Wildlife State Trooper in Alaska. Is there a branch like that in other states? I know Alaska's,
Yes.
special, but
Yes, there are. So
so
there's
do you
like
have a group? Is there Fish and Wildlife cops that are South Carolina State Troopers or anything like that?
well, there's DNR here, Department of Natural Resources, ma'am, and then there's like every state has their own natural resources. Like I know where I was in Florida, it was Florida Fish and Wildlife. And they're big on the environmental side, but also we have specifically trained law enforcement officers. We have 2 here in Georgetown that are trained to do living marine resources, and they've gone to school specifically to look for those violations and to inspect those type of vessels.
Wildlife fisheries and DNR agents I ran into, they seem to have such a passion for it. They grew up hunting and fishing, and they love it, and they want to keep it safe, and they want to keep it going.
Yeah.
You run into them, they're some of the strictest agents I ran into because they love it, and they want to keep it going for the future.
Yeah.
So
He was almost in tears telling us about somebody that had killed grizzly bear cubs.
exactly.
And
Why?
when we were out on his private boat with him on his day off, and he pointed way in the distance. He said, "You see that boat there? That guy's fishing right now, but he's going to leave because he recognizes my personal boat." And he did. The boat left.
There's some awesome guys out there. All right, fun facts on average day. I'll just leave this up here for y'all to read for a minute or two. Then we'll go to our next section. I know we're running a little late on time. I don't mind if y'all don't mind.
What do you do with all the drugs you seize?
So the drugs go to 2 different processing centers, one in Fort Lauderdale, one in Fort Lauderdale, and there's the other ones in San Diego. And they go to the DEA processing center, and so they do all analysis on those each drug case, so they can determine where it came from, what cartel's making what, who they're interdicting, and then it will be a process for, I don't know what they do with it after that. I think they destroy most of it.
Send it to California, they'll sell it.
All right, we're going to go on with section 2 of it. Section 2 and 3 are a little bit shorter. Safe boating. This is another blurry picture. Sorry for the blurry picture. Speedboat ran into right into a steel piling, split in half, just from not paying attention. So speed kills, life jackets save most of the time, and a good float plan and knowing where you're at to navigate the waters is huge. It is. What do the OSs now? What do QMs say? Put your anchor out. I'm on rocks. All right, a little some history. So this is going to be some history and how we got different missions of the Coast Guard. 1790, President Washington signed the Tariff Act, authorizing construction of 10 vessels, referred to as cutters, to enforce federal tariffs and trade laws and to prevent smuggling. This is when the Revenue Cutter Service expanded in size and responsibilities as the nation grew. Law enforcement, living resources came out of the Revenue Cutter Service for one of our missions today. 1950, the Revenue Cutter Service merges with the U.S. Life Saving Service.
We skipped right over Alexander Hamilton.
We did. I have a sheet up here with other things on it. I didn't want to make it too long. 1950, the Revenue Cutter Service merges with the Life Saving Service, officially renamed the Coast Guard, making it the only maritime service dedicated to saving lives at sea and enforcing national maritime law. This is an old PB patrol boat that was used back in the Coast Guard for enforcing some of these laws. That's an awesome boat, isn't it? That's what I want. This is another inspection of a different commercial boat. I'm sure those are beans and coffee in there. Could have been on the side if it was wrong. All right, 1939, President Roosevelt ordered the transfer of the Lighthouse Service to the Coast Guard, putting it in charge of maritime navigation. Also where we get maritime safety for ACE Navigation, and ACE Navigation was formed out of this. Bottom left is a lightship Nantucket. This was the old style lighthouses. We did have lighthouses back then. They would moor this boat out. Had a light right up here that they had a crew that would keep it burning at all times of the night and day. And different boats would drive on it and steer on it to be able to get into port. They would also do search and rescue from that boat in foggy weather. A boat would come in and not see the light. They would go out there and help out best they can. Bottom right is a recreational boarding. A lot of Coast Guard stations they do recreational boardings for educating, making sure the normal Joe boater is safe. 1946, Congress permanently transferred the Commerce Department, Bureau of Marine Inspections, and Navigation to the Coast Guard, putting merchant marine licensing and merchant vessel safety in its control. Two missions we got from this: marine environmental protection and marine safety. Some more pictures of inspecting different commercial boats. This might be a recreational boat on the right side, and maybe a smaller commercial boat I couldn't really make out, where they're doing a marine safety inspection on it. Make sure they're in compliance. 1967, the Coast Guard is transferred to the Department of Transportation, and then in 2003, the Coast Guard is getting transferred to the Department of Homeland Security, where it currently serves. You guys know why we were transferred from Department of Transportation to Homeland Security? 9/11. There we go. All right, United States Coast Guard Outlook Strategic Plan from 2018-2022. Just got our new Commandant Schultz. Ready, relevant, and responsive are his key terms for us right now. And we'll go into what his outlook's going to be. Build the 21st century Coast Guard. Build new offshore patrol cutters, fast response cutters, and the ice-breaking fleet. This is where we're trying to push Congress for money every year to be able to make our fleet better. Some of our boats are 19, what's our oldest? Smilax, 19... Smilax.
Name it.
What year?
Name the boat, I mean.
Smilax.
Oh!
It's a cleaner fleet right now. I believe it was 64, might have been earlier than that, but 1964 is our oldest boat right now.
What
Construction tender.
Oh, wow.
So then the chalk's next after that. I think the chalk was 65.
So talking a little bit on this, So if you guys don't know, this is the new fast response cutter. They're replacing our 87s and 110s, more of the 110s. We also have what I was on, the national security cutters. They started out with 8. We did so much stuff, they're building 11. They're building, like I said, 2 more polar rollers. They're currently in the works. The budgeting's still working, that's going to be a little bit. And they are already under contract to replace our 210s and 270s with 25 offshore patrol cutters, 315-foot boat. They're being built out of Panama City, Florida. You'll see we're expanding bases. Charleston in the next 10 years will probably be the biggest Coast Guard base in the nation. They're taking over that whole FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down there. They're looking to put 4 national security cutters there, 4 OPCs, an FRC, a 225. They're going to move everyone from downtown all the way up there. It's going to be huge.
Is it within the old naval station was?
Yes. Yeah. So the old naval station, that's now the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center / and then Denton's shipyard's kind of up north. That whole place is going to be all Coast Guard.
Is Wetzy staying there, or are they moving?
Fletzy is.
It's in the works still.
It's going to be a little while. They're working out the details, but when I just left there, we got briefings on what that place is going to be. They're consolidating. They're getting better about managing the fleet. They're getting better, and yeah, it's going to be a whole new fleet. So 25 new 315-foot boats.
How long has Flitsy been there?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Wow.
It's been there a while, but it
Probably.
hasn't been there forever.
Have they started decommissioning any 270s yet?
Not yet.
I only asked because I own a piece of the last one, the newest one.
Mm-hmm.
And allegedly one day I get to go on board and take something off it. I'm still kind of young, but and since it's the oldest of 8, I just seen if they started doing anything to the Bear or anything. Is he still running?
Bear's still there in Portsmouth.
Portsmouth. All 6 of them up there. Six
Yeah,
or 7.
but I think, well, they're not starting the building for the new OP season until 22.
Oh.
So, but the contract's been laid, everything's been set for it. They're starting to put crews together next year, or 2 years from now. And the first one should be rolling out in 21, 22.
Mohawk was out of Florida.
Key West.
Key West, still there?
Yeah, 'cause is it still going strong?
Yes, sir.
A lot of what's going on now with the Coast Guard, the plans they're making. Howard Coble was a congressman from Greensboro, North Carolina. Howard and I served together in the Coast Guard in 1960, and Howard, very active his entire time in Congress. His whole focus was Coast Guard, Coast Guard, Coast Guard. A lot of what you're seeing was due to Howard, and unfortunately Howard died 2 years ago. But he deserves a lot of credit.
Maritime Border Security and Transnational Criminal Organization. It's kind of a long one. We'll make it brief. Drug smuggling. We're out there.
That's the new mission.
They're hitting it hard, and they want to put an end to it. It will never end. It's been there forever, but they're hitting it hard. They're making our presence known very, very large out there. Do you want to touch base? We already kind of went over it.
We already kind of went over it. It's just, so like I said, they started out with 8 national security cutters contracts. They already are up to 11 because they're making a dent, and it's actually working. So I would not. That's what all these new boats are for. They're all going to be down there.
Yes, ma'am.
You do live training on boarding vessels. We were coming out of boat for 1 year on our sailboat heading to Maine, and on the regular radio channel, we heard, somebody being stopped, and we could see the boat. It was about 2 miles offshore from us. And there was a helicopter, and there was Coast Guard, and there was this boat, and they told everybody to go to the bow of the boat and stay there, and they were coming to board them, and we listened to the whole process until we got out of range. There was a huge argument on our boat about whether it was real or not. Was it a training mission? And,
They do training on it all over the place. And I can't speak to that.
North Carolina.
It could be a multiple of things. They could be doing training. It could be an actual something they found out
That was
about that.
What
flying a
channel?
foreign flag.
What channel of radio was it on?
Probably 9.
Was it 9?
Could have been legit.
Yeah.
We were all fascinated by it because, they had the big boat with the guns and the helicopter and
That may be a
people and
little-
everything. It
That may have
was
been something
fascinating.
else.
I think it's better to come from me than you, but what happens is that they've already, both these fellows have mentioned that they rotate in and out. The Coast Guard does something that obviously they're still doing is to keep the crews happy and they rotate them different places so they get a bigger, better experience, but then they can share their knowledge and train other people. Because you haven't mentioned the most important fact about the Coast Guard, and I'm pretty sure it's still smaller than the New York City Police Department. What are your numbers these days in 2018?
50, I think it's right. I think it's 54,000 active duty.
You're a lot.
I had it up here, but it was from 2016 was the most recent number, so I took it down because I didn't want to.
That's huge. It was always like 35,000
Yeah.
or about. So what they have to do is they have to train each other when they get to the duty stations, and it overlaps a lot. So depending on the person who's in charge, he doesn't feel confident about a new batch of young guys show up, so they send them out and say, look, find somebody that you got to. I can say this. These guys can't say this. Find somebody that looks like, it'd be a good way to train the younger guys that are just coming online or coming from a different station. Some guys come from the West Coast, some guys go to East Coast, West back forth. Some people have never been on a boat as far as like a duty station. Sometimes they go up to Alaska and then they come to the Gulf of Mexico. It's like, wow, But they take things for granted. They can't. They got to train. That's part of what keeps them fresh.
So, on what he just said about the Coast Guard, we're very different than the other military branches. So the other military branches are very specialized. Like when you go in and you want to choose your job, you become specialized. Like if you're going to go in the Navy, there's like 3 or 4 or 6 different types of bosun mates. Like you could just literally, your only job is to launch aircraft. That's it.
Aviation bosun mate.
That's it. That's it. Coast Guard's very different. So you could be on the same boat. Just on the James, my previous boat, I think I had I got switched around to 4 different jobs on the one boat. We have to cross-train so much different. I worked in navigation before. I worked in maintaining survival equipment. Like I said, I did pursuit stuff. Now I do training. Like we just have to do so many different jobs in the Coast Guard because we're so few.
Yeah, I was a QM, right. One of the reasons they took that away anyway. They did away with the QM rating because of me. But it was the quartermaster as a master helmsman, navigator, damage control petty officer, and then it just never ended because there's only 100 guys on a 270-foot ship. The Navy, 500-foot ship, they gotta have 5,000 people. Okay, 3,000 people, and every person has a certain job. Oh, the worst possible rating was signalman. When you have ADHD,
they do bosun,
trying to do signal flags, trying to do semaphore, and then they throw in this thing called flashing lights. That don't work with your brain really easy with ADHD. That was a lot of fun back in those days. I'm lying.
All right, this is coming up huge too in all branches of the service, in the government, all around the U.S., all around the world. Cybersecurity. I'm not tech savvy, or tech savvy guy just left. Cybersecurity can shut us down. My computer goes down for a day. If I'm not out on the boat, I don't know what to do. I'm serious, and I'm not tech savvy. Every program that we have, if I have to check my boat out, obviously there's backups to it, such as paper. If I have to check my boat out now, I got to go in a program, check it out, so then I have oversight over the whole Coast Guard. People know where I'm at, where I'm going, what I'm doing, who's with me, how long I plan on going out for, what my risk assessment score is, and what the weather's going to be where I'm going. Backups paper, I fill out paper, I put in the program the next day. But then everything that we do out there, such as boardings, or I service a light out there, or the marine safety units are doing inspections, it's logged in there. It doesn't sound big, but if it gets in the wrong hands, they get the intel of it, and it's getting huge.
Especially with the intelligence side now too. Speaking about like the migrants and the drug stuff, like all that's in a computer system. So our national security infrastructure, as far as the Coast Guard, is really ramping up because we're getting more involved with the more secretive kind of dealings.
Yes, sir.
Is there a dedicated group within the Coast Guard for that, or is
yes,
that a
they
shared
just established
exercise
it within the last 5 years. Yes,
Did
it's
you see that new message too? IS is with the cybersecurity training.
But they have a whole cyber command now that is out of Washington, D.C., and they are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And that's specific to the Coast Guard?
Specific to the Coast Guard. It is coasties that are literally, their only job is the security of our Coast Guard information and our worship.
It's kind of funny, but I know you're coming to the end of your conversation here, and I didn't want to thank you all very much. But in 1986, there was this thing in Fort Lauderdale that was invented, and it's just in the last year or so that I've told the story for over the 1,000th time that I saw. I'm not going to use bad words. I'm going to say I smelled something funny. Okay. That's a nice way I can say it. But zero tolerance. You guys were in high school or kindergarten or something. But in the back of the room of 500 people in Fort Lauderdale, it took me, we won't say 30 years to figure this out, but there were 2 recruiters in the back. And it was like almost as if it was like a light shine that turned on really bright on me. But it was just like, I know it wasn't made up, I know it was real stuff. But you guys needed recruits. But you wanted people who knew about boats, like West Marine hires. People that live on boats, people own boats, people know about boats. That's why West Marine is so good, because they got people working there. Whereas what this whole ocean, captains, owners, and crews on one side of the room, and customs and Coast Guard and whatever was on this side of the room. And it was really interesting because both people had their say. I talked to a recruiter the that night, and the next day, 2 days later, I went down to Miami and joined. But it was just like, today I have a friend, and I'm not saying he's a great friend, but I know him enough to know that he'd be an asset. And he's telling me that it's been over 1.5 years, and he still doesn't have okay to get in. What's up with that recruiting situation? You guys are really tough, huh?
They're selective right now. I've talked to recruiters
Very selective.
out of Charleston. They're selective. We do have enough people wanting to come into the Coast Guard now where they can be selective to fulfill the spots that we need. And it's also, I have younger guys coming in with master's degrees. I'm 32. These guys are just coming in. They've been about a year and a half.
I guess they can be selective.
So, they got guys coming in with master's degrees now that completely outrank my education background, and they're getting in because they have that. So it's crazy.
I mean, are they
You need that expertise.
Yeah, and they're good because cyber command like this, cybersecurity.
But they're doing it on purpose per se?
Yes.
Because like, well, I'm saying like the Coast Guard Academy, you know, if you can't get into there, what you can also do, they come in as what do they call it, officer candidate? What do they call it?
They can do officer candidate also. These are coming in just as seamen. These three, I think you guys, 2 of the 3 were just out of high school, right? Come in, and Seaman Hess over here is actually applying for the academy. So we're going to pushing to get him in though. And he's got it. So, but yeah, they're just coming in. They just want a different aspect before they do their 4 years. They get the experience, and then they get cybersecurity experience, and they have that to go on their next job.
If I could say this last thing I want to say.
Go ahead.
I tell people this rarely, but if it has to come out, it has to come out. But there's really only one thing that's possibly to look like a good thing ever came out of 9/11, and I was on the far end of Long Island Sound, sailing between Connecticut River and Montauk when it happened. And that day, the button was pushed, and the Coast Guard was no longer underneath the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation, the same people built holes in the road, potholes in the road, and did that. The Coast Guard became Department of Defense, and then, like you said, Homeland Security was built around it from then. But that's the only thing that you could ever look at 9/11 and say it's positive, because finally, you guys became 100% real.
Congress solid.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Definitely with recruitment, could you speak a little bit about the diversity of the Coast Guard insofar as male, female serving,
Yes.
and cultural diversity?
So we highly embrace diversity in the Coast Guard. That's how you get your best ideas. So we employ everyone. However, all the ships are completely, doesn't matter, male, female, there's berthing for everyone, everyone's accommodated. Doesn't matter gender, race, sexual preference, doesn't matter. Coast Guard accepts everyone who they are. We're very strict on civil rights. We have advocates. We do trainings every year. We are very diverse of the community in the Coast Guard. And especially even here at Station Georgetown, you know, we have 2 females right now. I mean, we have many different ethnic backgrounds, all different, just from all over the country. And it brings ideas together. We love that.
The Academy is about 1/3 women now. When I got in the Coast Guard in 1965, of course, there was 0. And we had recently up in the 1st Coast Guard District out of Boston, we had a Coast Guard female admiral in there. And in marine safety, we bumped into several of them. So it's I think it's a very, it's made remarkable progress. It's probably not 100% there.
1976, the first female was admitted into the academy to go to school.
And the first vessel command on military services to go to a woman that was a Coast Guard. I think about a 95-footer.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So, but on diversity, the way I look at it, and I feel like everybody should look at it, is the more people and culture you're around, the more you learn. You can only gain from it. So Coast Guard Women says diverse as possible and gains for everybody. We're in not every country, but lots of countries around the world. Let's learn how to work with everybody.
So finishing up, we already talked about this. This is our polar regions, what we're doing out there. Like I said, 2 more polar rollers, doing research in Antarctica and up in Alaska, up to the North Pole. And then last slide to finish off, we increasing maritime commerce. So, you know, with the economy the way it is, our job is to protect the U.S. economy as well. That was our original mission, it's a cut of revenue service. So we continue that mission every day.
Patrick, Christian, thank you very
Not a
much.
problem.
So you have 500 men and women just down the street here?
Oh, no,
For all the tasks, it's just amazing. How many are?
so we have, how many do we have at the end?
I have 7 at my unit. You guys have 36 plus 50 reservists somewhere around there?
No.
No, am I wrong?
Close. We have, we have about 28 active duty members and then another 12 reservists, so we have about 40 strong in Georgetown. And our area goes from McClellanville all the way up to North Carolina border, and we go up to 50 miles offshore, but we can always go farther if we have to.
Just amazing. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very, very much. So I should have asked specifically, how many Coast Guard veterans are here? I mean, obviously, this is wonderful.
This Thanksgiving Day will be my 59th anniversary of my first day in Cape May.
I went to Cape May on Thanksgiving night too. We're partying on Thanksgiving Day, brother.
Bob, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
As a former offshore sailor, and before that, the waterway sailor, I just want to thank all of you who have served.
Yes.
Because if it weren't for you guys, those of us that go out to sea would not be able to do it. From the aids to navigation, to knowing that you were there if we ever have problems. So thank you from the bottom of my heart as a sailor.
Wow. Thank you.